All right, I found my board, my wonderful board, and we're talking about the craze that was Nvidia. There they are, a overnight sensation, 30-some years in the making. Let's dive into a little bit of the history, and I'm going to go fast through it. So those of you that will say, hey, you forgot about this chip or that chip, don't worry about it. I want to take you through a fast run to talk about what's going on now and what they're levering, because as we're about to find out, it is a dawn of a new generation of technology that we're all going to see in so many ways. And Nvidia is not only in the driver's seat, they're not just in the driver's seat for this new area I'm going to talk about, AI. They are actually paving the freeway, the highway, the road to the future, and they are the lead car on it. Here we go. Nvidia, an overnight sensation? No, they've been around for a while. Nvidia posts record revenue up to 265%, booming AI business. There's the headline you saw. Many of you may not know that they've been around as long as they have. Then Nvidia surpasses Alphabet in market cap. So in other words, they're more valuable than Alphabet, which is Google, and Amazon. Oh, so they're like the #3 most valuable company. A lot of you, maybe in your 401k or an IRA or something, knew about them for the last couple years, but the story is bigger than that. Then Nvidia hits major milestone as AI hype is no longer hype, becomes earnings. When hype becomes earnings, it's a real business and driving to the future. We've heard about ChatGPT. We've heard about all that. It's real, it's happening, it's hyper profitable. It's gone from hype to hyper profitable. But an overnight sensation? No way. Let's dive in. Once upon a time, you're going to love this. Nvidia was founded at Denny's as 3 engineers got together to talk about the future of making chips, and they all had a kind of a heart for graphics. It was founded by Jensen Huang. You've seen him. He came from a company called LSI Logic. Those of us like me that are geeks that have been around for a while remember LSI. Curtis Prim, who is at IBM and Sun Microsystems, and Chris Malachowski, who is at Sun Microsystem. Now, these people, I remember the Sun Spark Station and workstations and stuff for Sun, Scott McNealy, and all that went on there. This was an early chapter, like, 1990, 1995, where these guys were just really cranking it out. And guess what? It would be 1993 that these 3 guys go to Denny's. And actually, it's this Denny's. I found a picture of the Denny's. That's what it looks like today in Silicon Valley, where they sat down, these 3 guys, and the joke that they've told on a podcast recently was, we would order a bottomless cup of coffee and just keep talking till we ran out of energy that day, go home and come back and do it again. And that, in 1993, making graphic chips for PCs was the dawn of Nvidia. So they were doing, and by the way, it's kind of funny, they used to call their products NV, right, for next version. And so they called the chip the NV1, which was short for next version. They used to label all their files and stuff. Hey, next version of this, next version of that, because they're inventors. And what do inventors do? You keep iterating, you keep innovating, you keep moving forward. And so that's what NV, or next version, was all about. So they go out, 1993, 1996, find some money, get together, start making graphic chips. That's different. That's like OnlyFans, and that would come later with the internet. Graphic chips that they were making. And in 1996, like many early stage companies, they were running on fumes, and they actually had to lay off half of their employees. They had done a technology, and I'll talk a little bit about this, where they were using quadratics. Quad means 4, while the industry was using triangles as a basis for making graphical representations. Never mind what that meant, but they talked about in their history that that was actually, they were learning the experience with graphics, so they were gaining all the experience, but they were actually on the wrong technology approach versus the rest of the industry. Now, sometimes when you're on the wrong technology approach, you strike oil where they strike nothing, and then you redefine the future. That would happen, but in this early chapter, they actually had a little bit of a stumble. And with that stumble, they laid off a bunch of employees, but they kept at it. They were, if you listen to any of the podcasts and listen to what they've talked about, Jensen and Chris talk about how they were on fumes and then they had their breakthrough product. They learned their lesson moving from quadratics to triangles, and guess what? The Riva 128 chip was released in 1997. They would sell 1 million of them, and it was a graphic chip for PCs that allowed the PC to have more advanced graphic representation and video games, because this was before those super successful consoles. And you remember what happened from PlayStation to PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2 was groundbreaking, what was going on with graphics and stuff, but that was a dedicated console for games. They were building graphic cards for PCs to do more, so you could play games on PCs. And this is 1997. So in the 4 years, they have a near-death experience, go through the white tunnel, meet all the engineers in the past, get revived on the operating table, and come out with the Riva 128 chip, and guess what? It was a screaming success. And they had this unofficial motto that you find all the early Nvidia people will talk about. You can find tweets about it and things that used to say, well, good morning, the company's 30 days from going out of business. And apparently they used to kind of joke with each other. Well, good morning, we're 30 days from going out of business, as this. So you got to think about this early chapter. It's not all roses and flowers and butterflies and chocolates. These guys worked their butts off and actually went in the wrong technical direction while getting boatloads of technical experience. Because remember, every time you fail, like you take a look at sport or anything, you have to work out and get ready and go on the field to play and actually play, and then fail. But look at all the workout and all the learning you did, and it comes with experience, and the next time you're out, guess what? You shocked the world. That's what they did. So here's the first 4 or 5 years. Well, let's go down it. 1998, they were now 5 years old from 1993 in Denny's, and they had an absolute reputation for graphics leadership. Go back and read some of the articles from 98. It's very interesting. They say graphics leader, Nvidia, graphics leader, Nvidia. You know, the Riva 128 card, graphics leader. You find all this. And those articles don't say, hey, they almost went out of business and laid off half their people just a couple short years ago. And in 1999, an IPO in January. So from 1997, the success on that card, to 1999, 2 years later, from a near-death experience to a product that hits it out of the park, to the stock market. And they're on there. They're away and going. Then they came out with the GeForce 256. If you know anything about memory chips, we had the 128 era. We double 128. It is 128 times 2. That's right. You right there. 256. That's correct. And from 256, we go to 512, and then we go to meg at 1024. I'm now speaking the math of chips and technology. GeForce 256, NV10. You remember, saw that they had the NV1, NV2. Now this is the NV10, their 10th chip, and they just got it. This thing came out, the GeForce 256, and guess what? The performance versus the industry was stunning. So not only do they have an IPO, they have the next generation that works. Guess what? Nvidia is now here to stay. Then they won a contract for making graphics hardware for these guys, Microsoft. And if you look at some of those early articles from 1994, 95 about Nvidia, and you listen to these guys talking on podcasts, they'll say they were in an argument with Microsoft because Microsoft was part of the triangle crowd. No, all these graphic representations and algorithms and things should be based, and visual polygon rendering engines and things like that should be based on triangles. And they're like, no, 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 we're going to go with quadratic. You're wrong. Well, guess what? Just a couple years later, they're public on the stock market. They win the contract to work with Microsoft. So you see, sometimes you can find a blue ocean even when you were wrong the first time, and then you come out and say, we're going to build the best graphic chips, the best renderings engines, and everything you've ever seen. And guess what? They win a contract with the leader of the free world at that time in technology, 1999, Microsoft. Interesting. So now we go into the next chapter, 2001 to 2007. Their stock goes from 16, remember, IPO here, 2 years later, and this year, after this success, they go from 16 to 66. That is 4x, so 400%. They also, the next year, 2002, cross $1 billion in revenue, and they start an era of multiple acquisitions. Graphics companies, chip designers, a variety of things, and not everything was PC graphics. They are now expanding their chip making and innovation into other areas, using the core competencies they have to build the expertise of the company and drive into the future. And again, I'm smoothing through a lot of things here to get to today what happened. They were then asked to assist Sony with graphics for PlayStation 3. Guess what? Who do you go to? You go to the expert. Sony says, hey, we want even more lifelike athletes. We want to have rain in Madden football that looks like rain. You would see these things showing up PlayStation. Who are they turning to? Nvidia. You're the experts. Help us with this. They then, 2006, came out with the CUDA, which was parallel processing architecture. Parallel processing, two things happening in parallel. So like you get home and you've wrecked the car, your dad is screaming at you, or your mom is frowning at you. That's parallel processing. Two things are happening at once. Makes sense? That's how I bring parallel processing in the modern world. And then your mom comes up and hits you. That's parallel processing. Well, your dad's still yelling at you because you wrecked their car. That's parallel processing. Think of chips doing that and more in parallel dynamics. Then 2007, Forbes Company of the Year, not just Technology Company of the Year, not just graphics, inventor of the year, not entrepreneur from the year from, who is that used to do, E&Y used to do entrepreneur of the year, not some magazine saying, oh, startup of the year. Forbes Company of the Year on the big stage, IPO in 1999, and 8 years later, recognized as Company of the Year, 400%, on your stock in 2001. 5 years later, people saying, these guys have come from the corner booth at Denny's. And by the way, there is now a plaque over that corner booth at that Denny's memorializing that is sort of a historical landmark in Silicon Valley technology where Nvidia was founded. And now, Company of the Year 2007. So from 1999 to 1993 to 2007, that's 14 years. Think about that. That's 14 years. So the company's now 14 years old on the big stage with quite the history and capabilities and an award recognition from an industry-leading publication. Now then, all these additional roads emerge. We fast forward 2012, involved with AlexNet. That's the start of today's AI. 2014, they actually had 3 specific divisions: gaming, automotive, and mobile, as in mobile phones. And they were competing with people like Qualcomm for chips that would be on your mobile phone. And at one point in time, they tried to buy ARM, which is a company that makes processors, ARM, and that transaction kind of fell through. But the point was, this is the stages they were on now. This is 20 years of Nvidia now, 93 to 2014. They are a giant. 3 divisions. 2018, they reinvent computer graphics. They reinvent it. So here they are from that original GeForce 256 and the 128 card. They reinvent computer graphics with the RTX platform in 2018. So this is now 25 years after the dawn of the company for PC graphics. Now they completely reinvent it, and it's only one of the things they're doing. 2022, Omniverse. They're powering the metaverse, and OpenAI's ChatGPT platform is built upon 10,000 Nvidia processing units. 10,000 of them. Remember ChatGPT, it very quickly answers questions and does things, and it's amazing. There's a lot of coding that went with that, but there's got to be a brain behind it working fast. It's 10,000 Nvidia chips all working together in a large data center. Now you can see AI coming. When you take one smart guy and you attach him to 9,999 other smart guys, you have quite the brain. Boom. This is it. And Nvidia started investing in and building data centers to support AI. ChatGPT, all the things you can do and how you can contract with ChatGPT and add functionality to your, maybe SaaS software and things you're doing, guess what? You're going to be paying Nvidia in an Nvidia data center to do it, because that's where part of this goes. So, and in 2023, growth suddenly reaches multiples of 100%. Grow 50% a year, that's pretty good. Grow 100% a year, that's great. grow multiples of 100%, 200 and 300% a year? Biz Doc, how do you do that? What's going on? Watch. Here we go. Here's Jensen. Take a look what happened. 2010, 3.5 billion, 4.3, down to 4.1, 4.7, 5, 6.9, boom, 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 17 billion. Suddenly, 2021 and 22, 27 billion. 2023, 61 billion. This is, by the way, doubling would have been 54. It's 61. And the earnings report they just put out this past week, which flipped everybody out because everybody has been watching their stock right here on this great big rise. Suddenly it goes here and it goes vertical. This here is the AI effect. Down here at apparently the 18 billion range is the rest of their core business. AI and those data centers, 10,000 Nvidia chips all working together, bingo. That's real revenue. That's not customers. That's not eyeballs on Twitter. This is dollars, ladies and gentlemen. And they went from 27 billion to 61 billion in the course of a single year. They are now the third most valuable company in the United States, only behind Microsoft, who's number one, sitting around 3 trillion now, and Apple. So there you have it. So what happened to the stock in there? Well, I told you about the IPO way back here. And it shows 82 cents because there's been stock splits. So when you adjust the original start of Nvidia, that was 82 cents, and you come all the way over here to this thing, and it looks like a rocket ship, but it's being propelled by real dollars. It's being propelled by $61 billion in revenue. So you look at this. Right now, 785 as of yesterday, which was February 22nd. Was yesterday. Today's the 23rd as we film this. And if you had put $1 in Nvidia, $1 in Nvidia back here at the IPO 60 years ago, I mean, let's be almost 60 years ago, because 1993, actually 50 years ago, 95,678% all time. You'd be $1 would be up $784. That $1 would be $784. Woof. But you can see where it was. Look at this line down here. And by the way, this is a high-performing stock down here. It's just that when you put a graph up here, you kind of lose track here. I would have to make this graph 30 feet tall for you to see that this was actually a strong performing stock that right in here, what did I tell you? It went from 16 to 66 that one year. And right around here, they were Forbes Company of the Year, 2007, which is right here. Look at that. That's what the fuss is about. So now, Chapter 1, the long road, being Company of the Year, computer graphics, then getting into these chips, and in Chapter 2, I call it AI. Look at what's happening there. Boom. So now let's go to the earnings report, the Q4 earnings report that for 2023 that just came out here in February, and what all the fuss was about so that we can see this. And again, even if you're watching this years later, you can see this as a defining moment for AI. So here we go, February 21st, this week. This is the most significant earnings report in U.S. business of the last 5 years. The number one most significant. Because of not of the dollars, but what the dollars mean. If you saw the end of Moneyball, where the Paul DiPodesta character and the Billy Bean character are sitting there, which is actor Jonah Hill as Paul DiPodesta and Billy Bean portrayed by Brad Pitt. And he shows him the offer he got from Boston Red Sox, and he goes, wow, this makes you the highest paid GM in sports history. And he said, I'm not taking it. He says, it's not about the money. And Jonah Hill, Paul DiPodesta, says to him, Billy, it's not about the money, it's what the money means. He understood. He wanted to stay with his daughter in Oakland and all of that. Well, guess what? It's not about this earnings report. It's what it means and what's happening in our culture as a whole with what technology is going to be influencing us and what's happening in technology that's driving those things that are happening in culture. Let me explain. The revenue was $22 billion versus estimates of 20. Okay, so they beat it and the stock went up. But the data center was the star. $18 billion of the 22, up 409% was the data center. What is a data center doing? It's running ChatGPT and putting AI in everything. Everything. So that means AI is up 400% in 1 year. Guess what? If you remember the internet and the browser that came out of Champaign-Urbana called the Netscape browser right around 1996, and the Netscape IPO, if you're old enough to remember that, or you had a business class that talked about that, that was a guy named Mark Andreessen. And that was the dawn of the internet. And then we had what was called ISDN modems and 56K modems, and finally you could get speed to your house. Okay, why was that important? At that time, here's some words, routers were new. Companies that make routers, boom, on the stock market. Companies that made servers, boom, on the stock market. Because that was the bricks, mortar, foundation, drywall of the internet, building the foundation of the buildings and the economy and the technology that would become our internet, because everybody was running to the internet. Suddenly your airline tickets could be bought on the internet. All those things had happened. 1996 is ground zero for that, and you look at the technology boom there, and then the dot-com bubble, because not all the companies on that boom starting in 96 made it, and the dot-com bubble popped 2000, 2001. You can go back and look, and there was a recession there. So the bubble popped, but there was a huge boom that went there in all of the technology and equipment where we all suddenly understood, what the hell's a router? What's a firewall? What's a server? We learned all of that back then because that was the tools, engines, like I say, the cinder blocks, the concrete, the rebar, the drywall that built the foundation and the structure that became the internet as we know it today. We are watching that right now in AI. What's happening right now in AI is exactly that. And it's being powered by one company more than others, Nvidia chips and their data centers. 409% up. So it's not just that it's up 4x, ladies and gentlemen, it's up 4x to the tune of $18 billion. I hope all that makes sense and is a helpful reflective history lesson back on what we're talking about here. Net income. There's a lot of money in them AIs. Look at that. $12 billion of net income, up from $1.4 billion a year ago, almost 800% increase in net income. Woo! So it's profitable, which also means that with competition, some of this will be coming down. Then, here it is. Nvidia said, this is a Wall Street Journal headline, Asa Fitch, give full credit. She's, that individual is a Wall Street reporter. I don't want to say he or she because I don't want to insult anybody, so I'll say that individual is a reporter. Nvidia sales reach new heights as company forecasts bigger AI boom. Bigger? Yes, we're not done yet. We are not done yet. The chip maker at the heart of the artificial intelligence craze, there it is again, has had a record run nearing $2 trillion valuation, third most valuable company in the United States right now. Now then, we anticipated the earnings report. Now the analysts go into mode of anticipating the future. Remember I told you that it was $61, $62 billion was the revenue in 2023. We just saw that the fourth quarter was $22 billion. Wait a minute. What if they did $22 billion every quarter? What's 22 times 4 to make a year? $88 billion. So in other words, they did a 60+ billion year, but with a $22 billion quarter, suggesting that if they just flatline, then next year would be $88 billion. Guess what? The analysts go to work using the publicly available and legally disclosed information. And look at this. Last year, 24, it was actually higher than the 59, but this than the 59, but year closing out, looking at 94, 115, 122. So they see it slowing down, but they see Nvidia continuing to grow. That's why you saw all the analysts come out and say, the stock I showed you is 780s right now. The analyst came out and said, our new price target is 850 to 1,000. If you look back in 2003 timeframe, plus or minus, there was a company named Qualcomm that was making chips for mobile. And there was Qualcomm, that their stock was on a tear. They had a near monopoly on chips. They have since got a divorce from Apple because Apple felt they were being held hostage by Qualcomm. Qualcomm felt Apple was not maybe playing fair. Never mind, they end up in court yelling at each other, throwing papers, lawyers get rich, and Qualcomm no longer has a relationship with Apple the way it did in the past on chips. It's much different. But there were times where Qualcomm every week, we're changing our guidance to 600, 800, 1,000, 2,000. The hell with it. Qualcomm's going to 5,000. You know, there were incredible, just amazing frothiness in the market. So now you have analysts here on the new dawn, the AI bubble, somebody call it, but Nvidia building a lot of technology, powering the foundation, the picks, the axes, the rebar, cinder blocks, and concrete that are building our AI future. Nonetheless, that's why you're seeing analysts give guidance now, price target 850 to 1,000. So govern yourself accordingly. If you in your IRA, you were to buy, you know, the SPY, which is the Standard & Poor's 500, S&P 500, you know, index, Nvidia is powering it. So will it continue to go up? I don't know. The Biz Doc is not an RIA, and I do not give investment advice. But I point out that if this continues and if this goes, they can do nothing but help the S&P index. And if that's in your IRA, you would be along for better, for worse, whatever happens. Again, not an RIA, and I'm not a stock picker. But you can see, I think, what I'm pointing to, that if all this happens and we don't have a recession or bad things happen, this is where it's going. So there you have it. There's a huge future, and AI is going to be everywhere. So now, what are lessons for you and me? Oh my gosh, Tom, I didn't build a company in Denny's, and 30 years later, I'm on the stock market going bananas. You know, what can I learn here? I run a plumbing supply company in Indianapolis. I'm doing a foundation repair company that's growing really, really well here in Indiana. I want to buy some of my competitors. I'm not these guys. Stop it. Chin up, eyes up, focus. Let's talk about it. What got you here might be useful after all in the future. This was a company that started in graphics chips, which required the knowledge to make a chip, team to make a chip, foundries to make chip, consultants to work with you, and places to sell them. Where you start as graphics and you move forward beyond graphics into processing and other things. You learn it. In the same way, your business today, what got you here, might be useful to get you there being a bright future. Now then, if you could also look back and say, we didn't go there, we ended up there. Here's what I mean by that. They didn't go out to invent AI. They ended up there taking advantage of opportunities that were presented. That can happen to you. If you're in foundation repair and not suddenly you move into roofing or other structures and things, waterproofing basements, buying other companies, there can be things that happen to you that you are continuing to grow. You know, because guess what? AI isn't going to fix your foundation. AI isn't going to waterproof your basement. AI isn't going to put a new roof on your house. AI might help the roofing people design better tiles and lower cost designs that work better for hail protection on your roof. AI may be over there on a computer designing the things, but you're still going to need people to put it on your roof. So there's plenty of businesses and everything where AI may have a role, but it's not going to be there. But the point is, you can have a business that's doing something today that you find your blue ocean of the future. You apply your core competencies to something else. Now, you make sure you stay in your lane. Am I in the same distributors, same sales, same things? Now I'm just expanding myself, doing more. Am I following trends that are happening? Do I have bright enough headlights to look down on trends? Or am I so head down trapped in my business that I'm not working on my business and standing above it, scanning the horizon for opportunities, following the trends? Always be innovating. How can I save my cost? How can I do it quicker? Is there a tool or a gadget that's come to my industry that we all should be using that's going to make life a little easier? Should I be inventing that tool? You know, if I took this hammer and I bent it this way and added this, I could make a hammer that's so much better for this. And all of a sudden you go to Home Depot, somebody has done that, and they're, oh my gosh, look at this, you know, custom extraction, roofing and foundation hammer. That's very interesting. Somebody got smart about it. You can be innovating, always be innovating, and seek blue oceans. If no one's there and there's something there, go through what can you create, eliminate, reduce, increase. Read the book Blue Ocean. Even if you're a contractor, to put your mind in the mindset, if you're an owner or you're somebody working with an owner, and you can be looking at things that take you into the future. You don't have to be three guys at Denny's in Silicon Valley where there's now a plaque celebrating the founding of your company. Maybe there's just you, and somebody should put a little plaque in that diner where you sit down and talk to your neighbors and say, this is where Fred originally conceived, Fred and Sons Roofing, that's been part of our community, part of this church, part of the school board. This is where Fred started. Go be Fred. You are Fred, and you can drive it forward. And if we can help you at Bet David Consulting Valuetainment with our content, with these case studies, with some of our conferences, come here. Jump in the pool with us. The water's fine, because we want to take you higher and watch you and cheer for you as you do. That is the story of Nvidia, and that is the lesson for you. And as I like to say, I'm Tom Elsers, the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you. And I'm going to go back to the studio and wrap up.